18th. We have circulated documented evidence received by our Ministry of Defense as official documents of the Security Council and the General Assembly. Those are Russian letters dated March 11, 18, and 29. There will be a new letter today. I recommend everyone to scrutinize these materials. Those are the copies of original documents, contracts, communications between the Ukrainian side and the Pentagon with authentic signatures, project documentation, etc.
Mr. Polyansky also argued that military biological activities of the U.S. on the territory of Ukraine are a violation of the Biological Weapons Convention. Russia has been accusing the U.S. of funding biological weapons labs in Ukraine for the past several weeks, stating that the Russian military has spent several days exposing the pathogen research being carried out in Ukraine under the command of the Pentagon. And also, one of the more surprising chapters of this war is the abrupt departure of Russian troops from Chernobyl plant, amid reports that they may have been exposed to radiation while they were occupying the area around the nuclear power station over the past 4 weeks. Now, this is the site of one of the world's most terrifying disasters, and Ukrainian authorities say Russian soldiers have left Chernobyl power plant after suffering acute radiation sickness. The power station, the site of the world's worst nuclear disaster in 1986, was taken back under the control of Ukrainian forces on Thursday as Russia withdrew from areas north of the capital, Kiev. But he said the soldiers may have been exposed. Power station chief Valery Seda said the thick dust that their vehicles raised into the air and the radioactive particles it contains can easily penetrate into the Russians' organisms through their lungs. It also said the Russians dug trenches in the Red Forest, long considered Chernobyl's most polluted area. The local mayor also said the Russian took an unspecified number of captive Ukrainian servicemen with them as prisoners. Since the Russian invasion, there have been fears of increased radiological risks in Chernobyl. Chernobyl's number 4 reactor exploded on April 26, 1986, causing the world's worst nuclear accident, which killed hundreds and spread radioactive contamination west across Europe. And the site lies near the Belarus border. Staying in the conflict between Russia and Ukraine, Russian President Vladimir Putin said starting Friday, that was yesterday, unfriendly countries, including all EU members, must pay for gas deliveries in the Russian currency and has threatened to hold contracts if payments in rubles are not made from accounts in Russian banks. Take a look.
Сегодня мною подписан указ, который устанавливает правила торговли российским природным газом с так называемыми недружественными государствами. Мы предлагаем контрагентам из таких стран понятную и прозрачную схему. Чтобы приобрести российский природный газ, они должны открыть рублевые счета в российских банках. Именно с этих счетов будет вестись оплата газа. Если же такие платежи не будут производиться, будем считать это неисполнением обязательств со стороны покупателей, со всеми вытекающими последствиями. Нам никто ничего бесплатно не продает. И мы тоже не собираемся заниматься благотворительностью. То есть действующие контракты будут остановлены.
Now, according to the decree, all payments will be handled by Russia's Gazprom Bank, a subsidiary of the state energy giant Gazprom. Buyers will transfer payments into a Gazprom bank account in foreign currency, which the bank will then convert into rubles and transfer into the buyer's ruble account. Berlin and Western partners have insisted that their contracts with Russian companies state clearly that their payments can be made exclusively in euros or dollars. Germany and Austria activated their emergency plans to secure gas supplies on Wednesday as concerns arose that Russia could stop deliveries before Moscow began its war in Ukraine. A third of Germany's oil imports, 45% of its coal purchases, and 55% of gas imports came from Russia. Earlier, Putin's spokesman Dmitry Peskov said that the new payment method would not affect the price of deliveries stipulated in their contracts. Here in the country, Oil Industry Management Bureau Assistant Director Rodela Romero told state-run People's Television that there will be a rollback on fuel products by next week. However, she declined to say how much. Take a look.
Release ang United States sa kanilang Strategic Petroleum Reserve para po mabalanse ang supply at demand sa world market. Tapos sa pagre-release po ng United States, nakiayon naman po ang IEA, yung mga European countries, na magbibigay din po sila ng volume na tutulong po sila sa pag-release sa mga stockpiles nila. Kaso po wala po silang sinabi pa na exact amount. Malalaman po natin next week. And then dagdag po sa dahilan sa pagbaba ng presyo, yung pong nangyaring lockdown sa China, particularly yung commercial hub nila na Shanghai na meron pong around 26 million na residents. Dahil po doon sa paglaganap ng COVID, nakakalungkot man po yung dahilan, pero dahil po na lockdown yung nasabing mga provinces sa China, bumaba po ang demand. At saka sa simula din po ng linggo, isa pong kadahilanan, yung nangyari pong peace talk sa Russia at saka Ukraine, na sabi nila ite-temper po o babawasan nila yung military operation but not necessarily ceasefire.
In California, fallout from the war in Ukraine is most noticeable at their gas pumps. Macy Membrere reports from Sacramento.
Thank you. In California and across the country, gas continues to be a hot topic because of the high prices. Although the national average for gas prices has started to level out and in some states decrease, California has seen an increase from the last week and remains the highest in the country. According to AAA, the current national average is about $4.29, with an average in California at $5.76. This is an increase of more than $1 in California when compared to last month's gas prices.
I would rather have high gas prices here than an authoritarian regime in the Ukraine. So if we have to suffer with a little bit of inflation in gas prices for a while to assure that such a wonderful country as Ukraine has an opportunity to develop its democracy, we should do that.
Especially with all that's going on in Ukraine and the Russian boycott and sanctions, it's a price to pay for doing the right thing.
In other news, California is sending supplies to aid Ukrainian refugees, which includes medical supplies such as IV kits, defibrillators, and beds. Now, Governor Newsom joined to help in sending out these packages, which also included 100 oxygen concentrators and personal protective equipment to refugee camps. Here's a short video posted by the Office of the Governor of California.
So many Ukrainians live in the state of California. We're accommodating their needs, their families' needs, everything you possibly can need, from beds to support medical supplies that are direct asks from the Ukrainian government.
In Sacramento, California, Macy Membrere, Eagle News, we live in interesting times.
Meanwhile, millions of Ukrainians may soon face serious food insecurity because of the ongoing conflict. This was warned by the United Nations amid reports that people are facing life and death decisions on whether to leave Mariupol and elsewhere more than a month since the Russian invasion. The alert from the Food and Agriculture Organization follows assessments in 19 of Ukraine's 24 regions, which indicated that it was uncertain that Ukraine could harvest crops, plant new ones, or sustain livestock production. Take a look.
What is happening in Ukraine with Russia Federation is affecting the whole world food security. We must understand that we were already in a world that we have 166 more million people chronically undernourished because of COVID-19. In a world that 3 billion people didn't have access to healthy diets. And in this situation, we are now facing significant increase in prices of all commodities and significant increase in prices of inputs. So what this means is that we expect undernourishment, chronic undernourishment, to keep going up. And we also will expect that for next year, the situation could be extremely tight, especially for the most vulnerable economies around the world.
To help support the wider relief effort, FAO has appealed for $50 million, but it's only 10% funded. Nonetheless, it has been possible to support more than 14,600 farming families by providing them with more than 740 tons of urgently needed seed for planting. Meanwhile, Spanish supermarkets can now ration consumer purchases of certain products from supermarkets as part of broad measures to cushion the economic impact of the war in Ukraine. Our correspondent from Spain, Beverly Madrid, reports from Barcelona. Bev.
Several Spanish supermarkets have started to limit the sale of sunflower oil as supplies dwindle due to a surge in demand from consumers fearing a shortage due to the war in Ukraine. Raw materials are missing and supply chains are breaking down. Grocery items are becoming more expensive.
Però sí, m'amoïna perquè impactarà fort. És un impacte fort que tenim després de la pandèmia, el mal, la guerra. Ja no sé què més ens pot caure.
Prices of essential inputs like fertilizers for farming are going up, and many farmers can no longer afford it. Some of them have to pay 4 times more for fertilizers than a year ago. Harvests are said to be less productive. Wheat prices have already doubled. The price of diesel has doubled too. Most of the empty shelves have been due to an ongoing lorry driver strike over soaring diesel prices, which began on March 14 and has curbed supplies of milk, flour, rice, and other basic goods. 3 weeks ago, Spanish supermarkets began rationing the sale of sunflower oil to stop customers from stockpiling over shortage fears due to Russia's invasion of key supplier Ukraine. Earlier this week, the government unveiled plans to offer 16 billion euros in direct aid and loans for families and companies hit by the impact of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. The price spiral will hit low-income earners the hardest. They will now have to be careful about what goes into the shopping cart and what doesn't. Reporting from Barcelona, Spain, this is Beverly Madrid, and back to you, Alma.
Meanwhile, China said today it was not doing anything to circumvent sanctions imposed on Russia, following warnings from EU officials that any attempt to aid Moscow's war in Ukraine could damage economic ties. Take a look.
No European citizen would understand any support to Russia's ability to wage war. Moreover, it would lead to a major reputational damage for China here in Europe.
Actually, we are not doing anything deliberately to circumvent the sanctions imposed on Russia by Americans and Europeans. You know our position on the issue of sanctions. We oppose sanctions, and the effects of these sanctions also risks spilling to the rest of the world, leading to wars of currency, wars of trade, and wars of finance.
Now, top EU officials are warned China's leader, President Xi Jinping, at a virtual summit a day earlier that any attempt to aid Russia's war could hurt ties between the two economic superpowers, adding that the business sector is closely watching events. The talks with President Xi, initially intended to focus on issues such as trade and climate change, were overshadowed by Western fears of Chinese support for Moscow in its attack on Ukraine. And the news continues here on Eagle News. We'll be right back.
Mula noon hanggang ngayon, gabay natin ang MTRCB ratings sa matalino at responsableng panonood. Sa tamang pagsunod sa MTRCB ratings, ginagawa nating ligtas at makabuluhan ang panonood ng bawat miyembro ng pamilyang Pilipino. Lumipas man ang panahon hanggang may pamilyang Pilipino, andyan ang MTRCB.
Si Vicente Castelo Soto III na mas kilala sa buong Pilipinas bilang Tito Sen ang isa sa mga pinakabeteranong politiko sa bansa. Sa tagal niya sa serbisyo, nakatatak na sa isipan ng mga Pilipino ang kanyang pagiging senador. Tila mas matimbang ang kanyang naiambag bilang mambabatas higit sa kanyang mga kontribusyon sa larangan ng musika, pelikula at telebisyon. Sa katunayan, Soto is one of the leading candidates in most of the polls as of March 2022. Ano kaya ang nagtulak sa kanya na kumandidato sa pangalawang pinakamataas na posisyon sa bansa? Ano ang mga plano niya sa Pilipinas, lalo na sa larangan ng pagninegosyo?
A politician thinks of himself and the next election. A public servant thinks of his work and the next generation. Ang suportahan mo yung public servant.
We'll answer all these questions in this episode of Open for Business.
Siguro nga, ito na nga ba? Ikaw na ba? Tayo na ba?
Hi guys! Ako nga pala si Kiko Necesario at abangan niyo po ako bilang guest performer sa hashtag Letters in Music ngayong linggo, April 3, 1 to 2 p.m. At syempre, dito lang yan sa Net25. See you po!
Panoorin ang bang-bang na bakbakan ng mga Mobile Legends players na Tara Gamers. Anong prutas ang may scientific name? Bakit?
Karni ko agad yung scientific name.
Bakit si Snap ang naisip mo dyan?
Parang di niya alam kasi lalaki siya eh.
Ngayong Sunday, alas 7 ng gabi sa Net 25.
Welcome back. Fresh sanctions on North Korea after its recent test firing of an intercontinental ballistic missile. Our correspondent from Japan, Dennis Liu, reports from Tokyo.
Concluded. Japan's government approved fresh sanctions against North Korea over its recent test firing of an intercontinental ballistic missile, following Washington's calls for tougher international punishment for the nuclear-armed state. Japan already has bans on trade and vessel entries as part of unilateral sanctions against Pyongyang, but said Friday it would designate 4 groups and 9 individuals involved in nuclear and missile development. Top government spokesman Hirokazu Matsuno told the entities and individuals would be subject to an asset freeze. North Korea said the launch was a successful test of a Hwasong-17 missile, a long-range ICBM that analysts say may be capable of carrying multiple warheads, which it first unveiled at a military parade in 2020. But South Korea's defense ministry said that Seoul and Washington have now concluded that the launch was actually of a Hwasong-15, an ICBM that Pyongyang test-fired in 2017. Japanese officials say, nonetheless, danger remains the same. They say the latest launch shows that North Korea now could have the United States mainland in its range if the weapon was fired on a normal trajectory. It also alarmed Japan, particularly as the missile landed inside its exclusive economic zone. This is the latest for now. Reporting from Tokyo, Japan, this is Dennis Liu. We live in interesting times.
And the price of Britain's traditional takeaway fish and chips is set to rise as a result of sanctions on Russian whitefish, as well as sharply rising energy prices. Disruption to the supply of fish and other key commodities is expected to drive up prices. Our correspondent from the United Kingdom, Erica Celestino, reports from London. Erica.
On a sunny they have weathered the storm of Brexit and COVID and are fighting the tide of rising inflation. But thousands of British fish and chip shops could be sunk by the war in Ukraine. At Captain's in the seaside resort of Brighton on England's south coast, owner Pam Sandhu is normally not one to complain. Yet the shelves of her large refrigerators are empty when they should be full of fresh white fish ready to be dipped in batter and deep fried, that's served to hungry customers with piping hot chips.
Fish is just so expensive at the moment, and people can't find the sizes that we want. This is all post-pandemic. It's you buy it as a graded size, and I think people are struggling to source the ones that they need, what they usually use. So that's affecting things a little bit.
In ordinary times, Russia supplied between 30 and 40% of the fish sold in British fish and chip shops, mostly cod and haddock. Ukraine is the world's biggest exporter of vegetable oil, which is used for deep frying, what the NFF calls Britain's undisputed national dish.
What needs to happen is other countries like Norway, I think the UK as well, they produce a lot of whitefish. We need to start stepping up and filling in for the position which once was Russia's, and that will take some time. But we're trying to absorb these costs as much as possible. We don't want to pass it on to the consumers.
Sandhu's restaurant has a terrace that looks out onto Brighton's Pebble Beach and Pier. She bought it 3 years ago and had planned to open in March 2020. Then came COVID, followed by rising inflation, and now the war in Ukraine and sanctions against Russia. It's been the perfect storm for fish and chips vendors. On a sunny spring Friday in late March, Sandhu was worrying whether she would even have enough fish to get through the weekend.
Well, we've been in this industry for over 30 years. There's never, ever been a shortage on fish. We've never looked at it, any shortage on any products than what we're going through now.
Crook, a fish and chip shop owner in Lancashire, northwest England, has increased his prices by 50 pence, a portion to £8.50. Fish has become even more expensive because some British trawlers are staying in port due to the high cost of fuel.
The other thing that's happening as well, a lot of the domestic fleet aren't going out fishing because of the cost of fuel. It's just not worth them going out and setting sail, so that's further pressure on the supply of fish, and it's driving prices further north.
Fish and chips, first served as a single dish in the 1860s, has long been a working class staple, although demographic and dietary changes have seen its popularity wane in recent years. The takeaway favorite, covered in lashings of salt and vinegar, used to be wrapped in old newspaper and is typically served with mushy peas or tartar sauce.
You know, but we do have to keep supporting all their local businesses, and as long as I can afford it, I will come down and have fish and chips whenever I can, because it's part of my growing up. It's part of my culture.
Reporting from London, Erica Celestino. Back to you, Alma.
Meanwhile, India and Australia signed an interim free trade deal that cuts tariffs on billions of dollars of commerce as the two Quad partners bolster their economic ties. The Economic Cooperation and Trade Agreement was signed simultaneously in New Delhi and Canberra by India's Commerce Minister Piyush Goyal and his Australian counterpart Dan Tehan in a joint ceremony. Take a look.
It's a historic day for India and Australia relations. It is particularly very important for India because it's the first agreement with a large developed economy in the last decade.
And this agreement marks the start, I think, of an economic partnership which is going to flourish further and further. I can see two-way trade doubling over the next short period of time based on this agreement.
In fact, by initial estimates, we expect at least a 1 million job creation in India in the next 4 to 5 years.
Both signatories are members of the Quad alliance with the United States and Japan, which is seen as a counterweight to an increasingly assertive China. At the same time, Canberra's relations with its biggest trading partner, China, are at their lowest point in a generation. Many Australian goods were hit with punitive sanctions, and ministerial relations are frozen. Beijing has been angered at Australia's willingness to legislate against overseas influence operations to bar Huawei from 5G contracts and to call for an independent investigation into the origins of the coronavirus pandemic. India and China have also seen a sharp deterioration in ties after a high-altitude clash in 2020 left 20 Indian soldiers and at least 4 Chinese soldiers dead.
We are one of the best, if not the...
Meanwhile, good news for the U.S. economy. For 11 months now, the country created more than 430,000 jobs in March, and the unemployment rate fell to 3.6%. Take a look.
Today, we learned that in March, our economy created 431,000 jobs. Nice sound to it. We also learned that in January and February, our economy created 100,000 more jobs than we previously had thought. That means that over the last 3 months, the economy has created more than 500,000, more than 500,000 jobs a month. Over the course of my presidency, our recovery has now created 7.9 million jobs.
However, the data said the number of employed people was still 1.6 million short of its pre-pandemic level. The labor market also revised higher its employment totals for January and February, saying they were a combined 95,000 higher than first reported. And take a look, we show you some incredible images of damaging waves pounding the Australia's east coast today. Take a look. Now, king tides coupled with powerful storm conditions offshore have seen waves across roads and into homes. It even forced some onlookers to run for their lives for fear of being swept out to sea. Danger warnings were issued for most of the coast in New South Wales. A video of a monster swell showed it reaching up to 5 meters or 16 feet high. Now, Peter Evans from the New South Wales State Emergency Service told AFP that crews were attending to several homes in the area where water had entered, but conditions were already easing. Coastal warnings remain in place tonight for New South Wales. Now, have you heard of arboviruses? They are some of the world's most dangerous mosquito-borne illnesses, such as dengue, yellow fever, chikungunya, and Zika. They're all mosquito-borne illnesses too, and they represent massive health threats in tropical and subtropical parts of the planet where more than half of the world's people live. Faced with a growing number of arboviral outbreaks worldwide, the UN Health Agency launched a global initiative to prevent a new pandemic. And Dr. Mike Ryan, WHO's head of the World Health Organization's emergency program, explained that the scheme would tackle the broad but related threats posed by dengue, yellow fever, chikungunya, and Zika in different parts of the world.
Each of these diseases, there have been gains in different aspects of surveillance, response, research and development, but sustainability is often limited to the scope and duration of disease-specific projects. There is an urgent need to re-evaluate the tools at hand and how these can be used across diseases to ensure efficient response, evidence-based practice, equipped and trained personnel, and engagement of communities.
Dr. Ryan also noted that interest in the WHO initiative has been strong in the 2-year run-up to Thursday's launch, despite the pressures of the ongoing COVID pandemic, as there are concerns about arboviral disease spread in populations that are least equipped to deal with them. The news continues. Here on Eagle News, we'll be right back.
Alam namin ang iyong pagsisikap. Dama namin ang iyong mga sakripisyo. Kita namin ang pagharap mo sa bawat pagsubok. Kaya sa kabila ng mga hamon ng buhay, nandito kami para umalalay. Kasi katulad mo, Gusto rin namin ang magandang bukas para sa kanya. Hatid namin ang dekalidad na edukasyon at makabagong pasilidad sa abot kayang halaga. Kaya huwag ka na mangamba. Sasamahan ka namin tuparin ang mga pangarap niya. Maaasahan mong sulit dito ang mga pinagsikapan mo. Sa aming mga makabagong pasilidad at sistema ng edukasyon. Mailalabas natin ang aking talino at mga kakayahan niya. Kahit sa munting halaga, makakasiguro ka na makakasabay siya sa mabilis na pag-ikot ng mundo. Sa New Era, karamay mo kami sa bawat hamon. Kaagapay mo kami sa bawat hakbang. Kasama mo kami sa bawat ngiti at tagumpay.
Mula noon hanggang ngayon, gabay natin ang MTRCB ratings sa matalino at responsableng panonood. Sa tamang pagsunod sa MTRCB ratings, ginagawa nating ligtas at makabuluhan ang panonood ng bawat miyembro ng pamilyang Pilipino. Lumipas man ang panahon, hanggang may pamilyang Pilipino, andyan ang MTRCB.
Pala ang Purple Shoes at abangan nyo kami bilang guest performer sa Letters and Music ngayong linggo, April 3, 1 to 2 p.m. Siyempre, dito lamang sa Net 25. See you!
Laughter is in the air dahil amoy na ang simoy ng katatawanan sa pagbabalik ng comedy prank show na talagang mapapawaw ang lahat sa ating ditong Laugh Trip Moments.
I'm starving!
Are you crazy? Nakikipagkulitan at tawanan kasama ang mga prangkito at prangkita na always ready sa mga hinanda naming pranks that will surely make you go crazy. Kasama pa rin ang mastermind ng mga nakakaaliw na practical jokes na si Joey De Leon. It's me! It's me! No! It's me! Oh no! It's Biro only! Malapit na sa Net 25.
Baka nakakalimutan mo na si Luz ay anak ng pinakamalaki kong kritiko.
Hindi pa ba sapat na nag-participate ako sa event ninyo?
Kung hindi lang nanggulo yung dalawang kalabang kandidato kanina, hindi mangyayari to. Sige, alis na ako.
Luz, sandali. Bago ako umalis, may kailangan akong aminin sa'yo.
Panalo o talo, it's you! Weeknights pagkatapos ng Mi Esperanza. Dito lang sa Net 25, Prime Time ng Pamilya.
Welcome back. Sri Lanka is suffering from its worst economic crisis in living memory. Reporting from Sri Lanka, here is Cristel Di Marucot. Cristel.
People waiting in queues that starts before dawn. That's what citizens now expect when buying essentials like gas and cooking fuel. In this line for kerosene, many have stood for 5 hours in empty stomachs under the heat of the sun. Everyone is angry.
மக்கள் லாமனைக்கு பெட்ரோலுக்கு கேஸ் இல்லாம தின்னு இல்லாம சாவுறாங்க இந்த 3 பேர் இனே புடிச்சிட்டாங்க.
Sri Lanka is facing its worst economic crisis in living memory. Many economists also say it has been exacerbated by government mismanagement and years of accumulated borrowing. Farmers face a devastating drought in 2016. The implementation of a government policy banning imported fertilizer compounded the issue. It was an attempt to make Sri Lanka the first organic farming nation, but instead farmers left their fields and food skyrocketed. Sri Lanka's predicament has been compounded by the COVID-19 pandemic, which torpedoed tourism and remittances.
Yes, I am expecting it to get a lot worse, and unfortunately they are unable to contain it because the people who created the crisis are very much still in charge of the economic management. So I think it's behaviorally impossible for them to acknowledge that they have made a huge blunder and they have to reverse all these incorrect economic policies.
The state electricity monopoly said it enforced 13-hour power cuts from Thursday, the longest ever, because it did not have diesel for generators. Several state-run hospitals have stopped conducting surgeries as they have run out of essential life-saving medicine.
I would definitely say this is the worst crisis since independence, just because while there have been crises, not to this magnitude and not to this level of disruption of the economy, the productive capacity of businesses to operate during power cuts and whatnot. It has impacts across the entire value chain.
Sri Lanka's capital was under heavy security on Friday after hundreds of protesters tried to storm the president's home in a night of violence and anger at a dire economic crisis. One person was critically injured, and police said 5 officers were hurt in running battles. 45 people were arrested, and in the latest official data released Friday, it showed that inflation in Colombo hit 18.7% in March, the 6th consecutive monthly record. Food prices also soared a record 30.1%. Like the queues for basic goods, the problems here seem endless. Reporting from Sri Lanka, Cristel Nicole Di Marukot, back to you, Alma.
Thank you, Crystal. Meanwhile, Will Smith resigned from the body that awards the Oscars 5 days after he assaulted comedian Chris Rock during a live global broadcast. Now, the actor said his actions, which overshadowed Hollywood's glitziest night of the year, were shocking, painful, and inexcusable. I betrayed the trust of the Academy. I deprive other nominees and winners of their opportunity to celebrate and be celebrated for their extraordinary work. I am heartbroken. Attendees at the Dolby Theater watched open-mouthed as Smith mounted the stage and slapped Rock across the face after the comic made a joke about his wife's closely cropped head. Jada Pinkett Smith has alopecia, a condition that causes hair to fall out. The group said this week it was starting disciplinary action against Smith, but on Friday, Smith preempted that punishment by announcing his resignation. Chris Rock, who told a comedy audience in Boston this week he was still kind of processing events, has drawn praise for the way he handled the events. In the NBA, the LA Clippers and Utah Jazz face off for their final meeting in the regular season as teams fight for playoff standings. The annual Filipino Heritage Night in Los Angeles returns to entertain basketball fans with live performances from artists like Filipino-American singer JR and rapper Guap Dad 4000. In Los Angeles, Alan and Eva Basilyahe have this story.
And we're able to introduce
This was a
number 8 and number 5 Western Conference teams, the Los Angeles Clippers and Utah Jazz, square off at the freshly minted Crypto.com arena.
6'4" guard Jordan Clarkson is well acquainted with LA, playing for the Lakers for the early part of his career before eventually finding a spot on the Utah Jazz squad. And being of Filipino-American descent, the timing of Utah versus Los Angeles couldn't be better for him.
Or for the thousands of fans who won't only enjoy NBA action, but who are also on hand to celebrate the annual Clippers Filipino Heritage Night.
It's very overwhelming as again, and I'm just super happy that I got to sing the Filipino national anthem today. Since I was young, when I was 2, I was like, I loved music, and I also played the piano. Well, not that good though, but now I play better. And when I was singing Part of Your World, like 2 years ago, that's when I discovered that I could actually sing. I think I just need to work on more Tagalog songs because I only just know 3 or 4, and my diction.
I really can't, absorb everything that I just sang a while ago, 5 minutes ago, and I thought we were just having a blocking, but it is what it is. I really had fun. That was a totally different experience, and being here in Crypto Arena, wow. I just love being in LA. The moment I got here, because if you may ask, I'm also a part-time actor and a singer in the Philippines. That's why I chose living here in LA and trying my luck here. And yeah, let's see what's gonna happen. Just keep on supporting the Filipinos, the Filipino artists here in LA. We deserve to be known globally.
They invited me to come sing the U.S. national anthem since I'm Filipino American. And I came out and the energy was great. I've been wanting to do this for the longest time and I'm finally here. So it's kind of like a dream come true for me to be on that court, just singing the national anthem and looking into the eyes of the players and just in the middle of everything. And it's an amazing feeling, just me singing and I see the whole crowd and all the players just kind of swaying and listening to me sing. It's such an amazing energy and I love it. I think Filipinos are kind of embedded in the whole Los Angeles community already, so it's great because when I come out here, because of that community, everyone's supporting each other, and I think it's important because it gives the next generation an opportunity to really make something of themselves, and that's what it's all about, not just the Filipino dream, but the American dream, just to really better yourself and, take your dreams to whatever level you can.
There's so many Filipinos over here in California, straight up, not just in LA, so I feel like just a chance for us to show a little more of what we are to the world will just be a great opportunity for everyone to just get a peek more into us, and because we just love spreading love and we love accepting love as well, just a love cycle.
We've had Filipino heritage for the past, I couldn't even tell you how many years, at least 15 years. So it keeps growing, keeps getting bigger and bigger, and we're able to introduce folks that don't even understand it.
I got a lot of Filipino friends back at home, so it's a great group of people, so good vibe tonight.
I actually have a good amount of Filipino friends, and I'm really cool with all of them. They're all great personalities, so I'm just really thankful to have them.
And I'm sure they try to feed you more than you need.
Oh yeah, for sure. They have great food, great food.
We have a Filipino American on the Jazz, but we have the Clippers here. Who are you rooting for? Do you have any predictions?
I'm always rooting for Filipino Americans, but I'm from Los Angeles, so I gotta root for the Clippers. You know what I'm saying? But it's fine. It's cool growing up here in LA as a Filipino. You gotta represent for sure.
I'm feeling the energy of everybody, even though y'all just normally interview me, so it's just it's gonna be crazy. Clippers, baby, Philippines.
As ready as Clippers fans were for their team to deliver the win, there was little to be optimistic about for most of the game, as Utah's active scoring and defense built a substantial 25-point lead almost midway through the third quarter. But as what all too often happens in the NBA, the pendulum can swing in the opposite direction at any moment, and that's exactly what happened in this instance. Steadily, LA chipped away at the lead, eventually finding themselves within striking distance late in the fourth. The Clippers finally overtook the Jazz around the 3:30 mark. However, what ensued next was a seesaw battle of lead changes, all the way down to 20 seconds left in the game. But it was at this point when LA was able to put Utah away for good.
It was a real nail-biter here at Crypto.com Arena as the Los Angeles Clippers edge out the Utah Jazz by a score of 121 to 115. With only a handful of regular season games left, both teams look to accelerate efforts in order to secure a playoff berth.
But regardless of what jersey fans wore, everyone came out on top because Filipino Heritage Night brought the energy and fun to the entire crowd. Ivan Allen, Eagle News, Los Angeles.
And as always, I'll end the day on a thoughtful note. Our ability to look back and smile at our past is proof that God's plan is to keep us moving forward. This has been Eagle News International. I'm Alma Angeles. Stay alert, stay informed, because we live in interesting times. Good night.
Isa pa! Isa pa! Iri pa! Isang malakas na iri na lang! Iri! Konti na lang! Iri pa! Iri!
Pamilya. Silang nagmulat sa atin paano magmahal, mangarap,